There comes a time in life when the familiar rhythm between parent and child begins to change quietly, sometimes painfully. As parents, we dedicate our lives to nurturing, guiding, and protecting our children. We give our time, our energy, our dreams, even parts of ourselves, believing that in return, we will always hold a special place of respect and appreciation in their hearts. For many years, this belief feels true, but as our children grow, build their own lives, and become independent, the relationship often begins to shift in subtle and surprising ways. One day you may notice that your advice is no longer welcome. Your voice, once sought after, is now dismissed. You may feel ignored during conversations, talked over at family dinners, or even avoided during important moments. The gestures you once made out of love are now taken for granted, or worse, seen as intrusive, and most painfully, you may feel as though your role as a parent, your wisdom, your presence, your worth has been quietly set aside. For many older adults, these moments stir feelings of frustration, sadness, and even anger. After everything you've done, for the countless sacrifices made in silence, it seems only fair that your children would show you the respect you deserve. Yet demanding respect rarely brings it back. Arguing, reminding, or pleading often deepens the distance. The harder you try to restore what feels lost, the more invisible you may feel. But take heart, there is a path forward, and it doesn't require conflict, guilt, or resentment. It begins with you, not them. In this guide, we will explore the deeper truths behind the changing dynamics between parents and their adult children. More importantly, we will walk through 7 powerful, practical actions that you can take to gently shift the relationship between us and our children, calling on any positive. They are real, meaningful changes in how you respond, how you lead, and how you live, designed to help you regain not only your children's respect, but your own sense of peace and purpose. You deserve to be heard, not for what you've done in the past, but for who you are today. So if you felt overlooked, unappreciated, or quietly pushed to the side in your own family, I invite you to stay with me. This isn't just about repairing relationships. It's about reclaiming your voice, your boundaries, and your joy. Because respect, once lost, can be rebuilt. Not through pressure or persuasion, but through presence, poise, and personal power. And if this is your first time with us, I welcome you. Please consider signing up or subscribing so you can continue receiving meaningful content created especially for older adults navigating complex family dynamics. Your wisdom matters. Your story still matters. And this journey, we will take it together. Let's begin. To understand how to regain respect, we must first understand why it slips away in the first place. This isn't always about ungrateful children or a generation that has forgotten its elders. Sometimes the shift happens quietly through misunderstandings, unspoken expectations, and the inevitable changes that life brings. When our children are young, we are the center of their world. We guide every decision, soothe every fear, and celebrate every milestone. But as they grow, they begin to seek independence. They form their own opinions, develop their own ways of doing things, and slowly step into their own roles as adults. This is natural. It is, in fact, what we raise them to do. But what's not often talked about is how difficult this transition can be for the parent. You may find yourself trying to offer advice that once would have been welcome, only to be told, "I know, Mom," or "You don't need to worry about that, Dad." You might notice fewer phone calls, shorter visits, or less patience when you speak your mind, and gradually, a quiet message begins to form. Not from their words, but from their actions. that your thoughts don't matter as much anymore, that your presence, while still appreciated on the surface, is no longer vital. This doesn't happen because you failed. It doesn't happen because they don't love you. It happens because roles change, and in many families, no one talks about how to navigate that change with care and mutual respect. In truth, many adult children are so busy managing their own lives, careers, children, responsibilities, that they begin to see their parents as support systems rather than people with their own needs and emotions. This mindset isn't always intentional, but if it goes unchecked, it creates an unhealthy dynamic, one where your sacrifices are forgotten, your time is devalued, and your voice is muted. The danger lies not just in their behavior, but in how you respond to it. If you begin shrinking yourself, saying less to avoid arguments, doing more to stay included, or holding back your own needs so theirs can be met first, you start sending a powerful, unintended message that you no longer expect to be treated with dignity, that your value is tied only to what you give, not who you are. But respect doesn't fade because of age. It fades when we stop standing in our full worth. The good news is, this dynamic can change. It begins not with confrontation, but with quiet, consistent strength, with small but firm shifts in how you see yourself and how you allow others to treat you. In the next sections, we'll explore the 7 powerful actions you can take to reclaim the respect that may have faded over time. These actions are not rooted in anger, nor do they aim to create distance. Instead, they are built on restoring the foundation of every healthy relationship: mutual respect, clear boundaries, and emotional self-reliance. Whether your children are mildly dismissive or deeply disrespectful, these steps can help realign the relationship not overnight, but steadily over time. You deserve to be seen, to be heard, and above all, to be respected. And that journey starts with a decision to no longer accept less than you deserve. One of the most common patterns that quietly erodes respect between parents and their adult children is the habit of seeking approval. For many older adults, this pattern doesn't come from weakness, it comes from love. You want to stay connected, you want to be helpful, you want to be liked, not just loved. And so, without even realizing it, you start adjusting yourself to fit their lives more than they adjust to fit yours. You might say yes when you'd rather say no. You rearrange your schedule to accommodate theirs, even when it causes strain. You hold back your opinions for fear of upsetting them, and each time you do, a small piece of your identity steps back, and a small piece of their respect steps away. The difficult truth is this: when you chase their approval, you teach them to withhold it. It becomes a tool, often used unconsciously, that determines whether your voice is heard or dismissed. Over time, this changes how they see you. Instead of seeing a parent with wisdom and authority, they see someone trying too hard to stay in their good graces. Respect is never earned through self-erasure. It's earned through self-respect. Consider the story of Margaret, a once independent woman in her younger years. She had raised 3 children while managing a small business and caring for her aging parents. But as the years passed and her children became adults, something changed. She began deferring to them in nearly every decision. She canceled plans to babysit at the last minute. She stayed silent when they criticized her choices. When they interrupted her or spoke sharply, she let it slide for the sake of keeping the family peace. "I just don't want to cause any tension," she once told a friend. But the tension she avoided on the outside began to build on the inside. Her children, once respectful and engaged, started treating her as though her opinions were optional, her time elastic, and her support automatic. not because they were unkind, but because Margaret had unintentionally taught them that her needs came second. In trying to keep the peace, she lost her voice. If this sounds familiar, understand this: it's not too late to reclaim your role, not by raising your voice, but by raising your standards. You don't need to demand their respect, you need to stop acting like you need their permission to have it. Start small. Say no when something doesn't work for you. Speak your mind gently but firmly when your values are being dismissed. Refuse to shrink yourself to maintain someone else's comfort. And most importantly, resist the urge to prove your worth through giving, fixing, or pleasing. Respect grows where self-respect is visible. When your children see you valuing your own time, honoring your own feelings, and standing calmly in your truth, they will begin to adjust. Not instantly, not without resistance, but slowly, steadily, the balance of the relationship will begin to shift. They may not say it aloud, they may not even realize it's happening, but beneath the surface, something essential will begin to form again. Admiration, the kind that doesn't come from sacrifice, but from strength. Your worth does not depend on how much you do. It lives in who you are and in how confidently you own that truth. It is a deeply human instinct to want to defend ourselves when we feel dismissed. When our adult children interrupt us, roll their eyes, or act as though our ideas no longer hold value, it's only natural to want to push back, to remind them of everything we've done, of all we've given, of the life experience we carry that cannot be measured in digital years or trendy opinions. But here's a reality many have learned the hard way. Arguing for respect often deepens disrespect. When you raise your voice, you may feel as though you're reclaiming space, but what often happens is the opposite. Your children may become defensive, less receptive, or simply stop listening. Instead of earning respect, the argument becomes a performance of frustration, one where everyone leaves feeling unheard. The truth is, respect is not restored through volume. It is restored through presence. Let me share with you the story of Frank. He was a retired school teacher, confident in the classroom, admired by students and respected by peers. But at home with his grown children, he felt invisible. They ignored his suggestions about financial planning. They dismissed his concerns about their health or decisions, and sometimes they laughed off his efforts to give guidance, as though he were just old-fashioned. At first, Frank tried to fight it. He raised his voice. He reminded them of his accomplishments. He insisted they take him seriously, but the more he fought for respect, the more they resisted. Each conversation became a debate. Each visit left him feeling smaller than before. Then something shifted. Frank decided he would no longer argue. He would no longer plead. He would no longer chase the respect he once held. Instead, he began leading by quiet example. He stopped reacting with frustration. When interrupted, he simply paused and waited. When dismissed, he listened calmly and then responded with measured confidence. He didn't over-explain or defend himself. He didn't try to win their approval. He simply showed up as someone who was already worthy of respect, whether they gave it or not. And slowly, something remarkable happened. His children started listening again. Not because he demanded it, but because he embodied the dignity they had forgotten to see. Respect is not always won in words. Often, it is felt in silence, in the grace with which you carry yourself, in the steadiness of your voice, and in the refusal to be shaken by disrespectful behavior. This does not mean you must remain passive or silent when treated poorly, but it does mean you must model the very thing you wish to receive. If you meet impatience with patience, arrogance with poise, and criticism with calm clarity, you begin to rewrite the emotional rules of engagement. Children, even grown ones, learn not only from what we say, but from how we live. If we respond to their disrespect with grounded strength, they eventually recognize it. They begin to mirror it. And over time, they come to value it. So the next time you feel tempted to argue your way back into their respect, take a breath. Stand tall, speak with confidence, not desperation, and remember, the most powerful people in any room are rarely the loudest. They are the ones whose presence speaks for itself. One of the quiet truths that many parents come to face in later life is this: the more emotionally dependent you become on your children, the less they tend to respect you. That may sound harsh, but it is not a judgment. It is a reflection of how human relationships function when balance is lost. You have every right to want love, connection, and appreciation from your children. These are natural, heartfelt desires. But when those desires become emotional needs, when your sense of value becomes tethered to how often they call, how much they visit, or how warmly they respond, you hand them the reins to your self-worth. And that is a heavy burden for them to carry, whether they realize it or not. When your children sense, even unconsciously, that your happiness depends on their attention, it shifts the energy of the relationship. What could be a joyful connection becomes a quiet source of pressure. They may begin to feel suffocated, even if they love you deeply, and that discomfort can turn into distance. Let's consider Helen, a warm, generous mother who had given everything to raise her two sons. She had been their fiercest advocate, their soft place to fall, and their biggest cheerleader through every stage of life. But as they grew older and became wrapped up in their careers and families, Helen found herself waiting by the phone, often disappointed. She called them frequently, sometimes daily, just to hear their voices. She reminded them of how much she missed them, how quiet the house was, how little they seemed to visit anymore. Her intentions were pure, rooted in love. But her sons began answering less often. Their responses became shorter. They loved her, yes, but their respect started to diminish, not because of who she was, but because of the emotional weight she unknowingly placed on them. Eventually, Helen realized something had to change. She began to pull her focus back inward. Instead of waiting for the phone to ring, she signed up for a watercolor class at the local senior center. She reconnected with an old friend for weekly lunches. She started taking short weekend trips with a nearby travel group, and over time she rediscovered a truth she had forgotten. Her life was still hers to fill, still rich with possibility. And then something interesting happened. Her sons began calling more often. They asked about her classes, her travels, her new friends. The tone of their conversations shifted from obligation to genuine interest. Helen had gone from a figure of emotional dependence to a woman of vibrant independence. And with that shift, their respect naturally followed. What this shows us is simple but powerful. Emotional self-sufficiency commands admiration. This doesn't mean cutting yourself off from your children. It means reclaiming the parts of your life that belong solely to you, your interests, your passions, your peace. It means reminding both yourself and your children that while their love is cherished, your identity does not revolve around their attention. When you stop needing their constant reassurance, you become someone they want to connect with, not someone they feel responsible for. Your presence becomes a pleasure, not a pressure. You are still the same person who guided them, who taught them to walk, who stayed up late worrying and hoping and praying. That person deserves to be seen. But to be seen, you must stand where your light still shines, on your own terms, in your own space, with a heart that is full, not just waiting to be filled. Respect is rarely lost in a single moment. More often it fades through a slow erosion of limits, when small slights go unaddressed, when dismissive tones are tolerated, and when inconsiderate behaviors are quietly absorbed for the sake of harmony. But harmony built on silence is not peace. It is avoidance. And over time, avoidance becomes resentment. One of the most effective and often most overlooked ways to regain your children's respect is to set clear boundaries, not with anger, not with ultimatums, but with calm, steady resolve. Boundaries are not about punishment or distance. They are about honoring your own dignity. They define what you will and will not accept in how others treat you. And more importantly, they teach others how to engage with you respectfully. Let me introduce you to Robert. In his working years, Robert had been a decisive and well-respected business owner. He managed people, handled conflict, and was known for his calm leadership. But at home, something very different was happening. His adult children often interrupted him during conversations, dismissed his opinions about family matters, and criticized his lifestyle choices, what he ate, how he dressed, even the music he listened to. At first, Robert brushed it off. He told himself it wasn't worth the argument, that it was just kids being kids. But each time he stayed silent, something inside him tightened. He no longer felt like the respected head of the family. He felt like a background character in their busy lives. Then, one evening during a family gathering, his son cut him off mid-sentence. Robert gently placed his fork down and said, without raising his voice, "I'll continue when you're ready to listen." There was a pause, a bit of surprise, but he didn't waver. Later, when his daughter dismissed his concern about a medical issue with a casual, "You don't need to worry about that," he replied, "You don't have to agree with me, but I do expect to be spoken to with respect." These weren't dramatic confrontations. They were clear, respectful statements of personal standard, and that was the key. He wasn't asking for permission to be heard. He was simply asserting that being heard was his rightful place. At first, his children pushed back. They rolled their eyes, they joked, but Robert didn't retreat, and over time, something began to shift. The interruptions slowed, the tone softened. His opinions were no longer brushed aside so easily. Why? Because he had shown them, calmly and without blame, that he would no longer participate in a dynamic where his voice was diminished. You don't have to issue harsh ultimatums or withdraw from your family to set boundaries. What matters is that when those boundaries are crossed, you follow through. If you say you won't accept being spoken to rudely and then allow it repeatedly without response, your words lose weight. But if you gently but firmly redirect the interaction, perhaps even choosing to end a call or leave a room when it becomes disrespectful, you send a clear, unwavering signal. You respect yourself enough to protect your peace. And here's the most powerful truth about boundaries. When you enforce them consistently, people start respecting not just the limits, but the person who holds them. If your children have been treating you with less consideration than you deserve, ask yourself this important question. Have I made it clear what I will and will not accept? And if I have, do I consistently uphold that standard? Remember, you are not asking for special treatment. You are simply affirming what has always been true, that your time, your words, and your presence carry value. And when you treat yourself that way, others will learn to do the same. As parents, giving often becomes second nature. You give your time, your resources, your energy, your support, freely, willingly, and often without being asked. You do it out of love, out of habit, and out of a deep desire to remain useful, needed, and connected. And for a time, that giving is received with gratitude. But over the years, something can change. What once felt like an offering begins to feel like an expectation. Your help is no longer acknowledged. Your sacrifices are taken for granted. You start to notice that even small acts of generosity, lending money, running errands, watching grandchildren, are not met with thanks, but with assumptions. And when you hesitate, even briefly, there may be frustration, not understanding. This is a painful place to be, not because you regret giving, but because what was once an expression of love has become a silent transaction, and you're the only one paying. Here's what's important to understand. When giving is not met with appreciation, it does not build closeness, it builds entitlement. And entitlement, when allowed to grow unchecked, begins to erode respect. Let's talk about George. He was a kind, dependable father who had spent decades being the rock of his family. Whenever his children needed financial help, George was there. When something broke, he fixed it. When they needed last-minute help, he dropped everything, even when it disrupted his own plans. But over time, George began to feel invisible in his own generosity. There were no thank you calls, no gestures of gratitude, just more requests. And when he finally had a health issue that required assistance, his children were too busy. The imbalance was clear. So George made a decision, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. He stopped offering help before it was asked. He stopped rearranging his life to suit every whim, and most importantly, he began saying no when giving would stretch him too thin. At first there was confusion, even pushback. His children were so used to his automatic yes that his boundaries felt like rejection. But George remained calm and steady, and something remarkable happened. Eventually they began to ask, not assume. They started to say thank you. They offered to return favors. His giving was no longer seen as an obligation, but as a gift. And that gift, now rare and respected, regained its true meaning. Here is the truth every parent must hear. Generosity should never cost you your dignity. When your giving becomes routine and unreciprocated, it doesn't inspire appreciation, it encourages people to expect more. But when you give with intention, within your limits, and only in environments where your efforts are acknowledged, your role shifts. You are no longer a resource. You are a respected contributor. This doesn't mean you stop giving altogether. It means you reconnect your giving to value, your value, their values, and the shared values that should live in every healthy family relationship. If you're unsure whether your giving has crossed into imbalance, ask yourself, do I feel depleted or taken advantage of after giving? Is my help expected rather than appreciated? Have I been giving at the expense of my own well-being? If the answer is yes, it's time to reset the tone. Start with small boundaries. Give only what you can joyfully and sustainably offer. Pause before agreeing to things that feel like obligations. And when you do give, ask for mutual respect in return, not as a demand, but as a standard. When generosity is paired with healthy boundaries, it becomes more powerful, not less. And in time, your children will learn that your support is meaningful because it comes from strength, not from sacrifice. One of the most liberating realizations in later life is that your happiness does not and should not revolve around your children. Yes, they are a vital part of your journey. Yes, you have loved them more deeply than words can fully express. But the purpose of your life, the joy, the curiosity, the growth, must continue independently of their presence. Far too many parents, particularly after retirement or the loss of a spouse, begin to center their emotional and social lives entirely around their adult children. Calls become the highlight of the week. Visits feel like lifelines. Hopes quietly hinge on texts, birthdays, or small gestures of inclusion. And when those things don't come as often as hoped, it creates a deep ache, one that is often hidden behind a brave smile. But the truth is this: when your children become the sole focus of your fulfillment, it can place a quiet weight on the relationship. They begin to feel responsible not just for staying in touch, but for keeping you emotionally afloat. That weight, even if never spoken, can lead them to pull away, not out of cruelty, but out of overwhelm. The most respectful, admired elders are not those who wait by the phone. They are those who remain engaged in the world, who continue to explore, create, connect, and contribute, even as seasons shift. Consider Eleanor. After losing her husband in her early 70s, she poured all her attention into her adult children. She checked in constantly. She offered advice they hadn't asked for. She waited for them to visit, and when they didn't, she made them feel guilty without meaning to. Slowly, they began to pull back, shorter conversations, less frequent visits. She couldn't understand why. One day, a friend invited her to join a local book club. At first, Eleanor hesitated, but she went and found herself laughing, discussing, debating, and making new connections. That small step led to others. She began attending community lectures. She started writing short memoirs of her childhood. She volunteered at a food pantry twice a week. And with each new commitment, something beautiful returned: her sense of self. Her children noticed. Not only did they begin reaching out more, but the tone of their interactions changed. They weren't just calling out of duty. They were curious, inspired, proud. Eleanor had reminded them that she was not just their mother. She was still a woman with a voice, a life, and a purpose. This is the kind of presence that invites respect. When your life is full, your relationships can breathe. You stop depending on your children for your sense of worth, and they begin to see you not as someone waiting for their time, but as someone who continues to grow and shine in their own right. So what does building a life outside of your children actually look like? It means reconnecting with interests that once brought you joy. It means exploring new skills or hobbies you've never tried. It means forming friendships with peers who share your values. It means moving your body, feeding your mind, and nourishing your spirit, not to pass the time, but to fill your life with meaning. It doesn't require wealth, perfect health, or constant activity. It requires only a willingness to say, I still matter. I still have things to learn, people to meet, stories to tell, and experiences to savor. Your children will see it. They may not say it right away, but they will feel it. And in time, their respect will not just return, it will deepen. Because people, no matter their age, respect those who live with intention, those who have their own orbit, their own rhythm, and their own quiet joy. You are not a supporting character in someone else's life. You are the author of your own, and it is never too late to write a new chapter. As life unfolds, it's easy to forget just how much identity is wrapped up in the roles we play. For decades, you may have been known primarily as a mother or father, a provider, a caregiver, a spouse. And within those roles, you gave your energy, your time, and your heart, gladly, often without question. But when those roles begin to shift, when your children grow up, when the daily demands of parenting fade, when retirement settles in, you may suddenly find yourself wondering who you are now, not just in title, but in voice, in spirit, in essence. This is not a loss, it's an invitation. Too often, older adults feel that their opinions no longer carry weight. They worry that speaking up might be seen as overstepping. They shy away from expressing preferences, offering wisdom, or asserting needs, fearing they'll be met with impatience or dismissal. But in holding back, they begin to fade into the background of their own lives. And with that quiet retreat, respect begins to recede as well. To reclaim your children's respect, you must first reclaim your voice, not with force, but with clarity, not with control, but with confidence. That means allowing yourself to speak openly when something matters to you. It means honoring your perspective, even when it's different from your children's. It means saying what you mean without apology, and holding space for your truth without feeling the need to justify it. Your voice is not an inconvenience. It is a reflection of your lived experience, your hard-won wisdom, and your deep understanding of life's complexities. Think of Harold, a retired engineer who spent much of his later years quietly observing family gatherings without saying much. His children often made decisions without consulting him. At first, he chalked it up to staying out of the way. But over time, he realized he was also suppressing parts of himself, his humor, his opinions, his sense of purpose. One day, while sitting at a dinner table listening to a discussion about a family vacation, Harold gently offered a suggestion about an activity he would enjoy. His voice was steady but unsure. He hadn't spoken up in years. To his surprise, his children paused, listened, and made space for his idea. The trip was planned with his preferences included. That small moment reignited something in Harold. He began offering thoughts more freely. He wrote reflections on topics he cared about. He even gave a short speech at his granddaughter's birthday party, one that left the room in thoughtful silence. His voice, once quieted by years of self-erasure, had become a source of presence and power. But you don't have to demand attention, but you must give yourself permission to take up space, to be seen and heard as the full, complex person you are, beyond your history as a parent. Reclaiming your identity also means reconnecting with the parts of yourself that may have been dormant. Were you once creative? Start writing, painting, or singing again. Did you once lead, teach, organize, or advocate? Find a cause or a group that welcomes your gifts. Do you still hold ideas, values, or dreams you've set aside for the sake of others? Let them come forward now, not to please anyone else, but to honor your own inner compass. When your children see you as someone who continues to evolve, reflect, and contribute, they will see you with new eyes. Not just as a parent from their past, but as a person of substance in the present. And most importantly, you'll begin to see yourself that way too. You've spent years supporting others. Now is the time to support yourself with kindness, curiosity, and courage, because your voice, your identity, and your place in the world have not expired. They have simply been waiting for you to return to them. At this stage in life, you should not have to fight for the respect of your children. You have lived, you have given, you have endured, you have shaped lives, supported others through storms, and sacrificed without applause. The respect you seek is not something you must chase. It is something you can quietly command, not through arguments or ultimatums, but through the way you carry yourself in this chapter of life. What we've explored together is not simply about managing relationships. It's about rediscovering your own strength, dignity, and identity. These 7 actions are not tactics to manipulate behavior. They are invitations to return to your center, to recalibrate how you show up in the world so that others begin to respond to you differently, more mindfully, and more respectfully. When you stop chasing your children's approval, you remind them that your worth does not hinge on their validation. When you lead by example rather than argument, you model the kind of maturity and emotional steadiness that draws admiration. When you withdraw emotional dependence, you teach them to appreciate your presence instead of assuming it. When you set boundaries and enforce them with grace, you show that your time, your energy, and your well-being are not negotiable. When you stop giving without appreciation, you shift the tone from obligation to recognition. When you build a life outside of them, you become someone they want to reach out to, not out of guilt, but out of genuine interest. And when you reclaim your voice and identity, you rise once again as someone whose wisdom, opinions, and stories add richness to every room you enter. Respect is not restored overnight. It takes consistency, reflection, and a quiet inner resolve, but it is absolutely within reach. And not just respect from others, self-respect is the bedrock upon which everything else stands. Let them see you as someone who still holds passion, still speaks with conviction, still walks with purpose. Let them witness your resilience, not as a remnant of the past, but as an ongoing presence in the present. And let yourself feel the quiet pride of knowing that you did not wait for others to see your worth. You lived it, showed it, and made it impossible to ignore. If this message has resonated with you, if you've found pieces of your own story in these words, I invite you to carry these insights into your everyday life. Even small changes in tone, boundaries, or how you prioritize your own well-being can begin to shift the relationship with your children in meaningful ways. And if you are new here, welcome. Please consider signing up or subscribing. This space was created with you in mind to inform, uplift, and support older adults navigating life's more complicated emotional seasons. Your voice matters. Your story is still unfolding, and we are honored to be part of it. Thank you for walking this journey with us. We'll be here in the next chapter whenever you're ready to turn the page.